Review, Senator Peter Wirth.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. I guess Congressman Lujan's doing what's happening in Washington. I'll do what's happening in Santa Fe, since we seem to have interesting times in both places. I am always happy to visit and touch base and kind of give you all a sense of where we are, how we got here, the wide variety of things that are going on right now. So we started this session in a fiscal crisis. We were in a fiscal crisis really throughout last year. We came in special session in October, right before the election. So as you probably all know, the governor, made the decision to veto a wide range of bills, and we're not really here to talk about all those, but there were over 100 bills, I can't remember the exact number, vetoed. Really important things that were bipartisan had passed overwhelmingly or unanimously. She was not happy with what she was given and the fact that we did not pass Representative Harper's bill. And so then it came time for the three pieces of this tripod that we sent up, and the governor made the decision to veto the revenue bill. So the $350 million was gone. She vetoed the tax policy bill that would have phased out $180 million of exemptions. And then she did something unique with the budget. Rather than veto the budget and bring us back to work on everything, she made the decision to use her line item veto, which is granted to her in the Constitution, to eliminate all the funding for the legislative branch. It's about $18 million. It's a very tiny amount of the $6 billion, $6.2 billion budget. But then she went one step further. She used her line item veto to line item veto all the money for higher education institutions in the state of New Mexico. $750 million in state money, and about $2.2 billion in federal money that's appropriated through the budget. So $3 billion that were vetoed, and her stated reason for that is that she was unhappy that the Senate Rules Committee had not heard regent confirmation hearings. They did hear a lot of confirmation hearings, including 10 regents during the session, but there were two in particular at UNM that she wanted to have heard that did not get heard. And so she used the line item veto to do this. And then, of course, we're in a predicament. We're in an interesting place because first time there's not any case for the lawyers. I see Dan sitting up front, but for the other lawyers, it's the first. There's no case law in the history of the United States where a governor has ever tried to use a line item veto to eliminate funding for another branch of government. Completely. So this was a first. Hadn't seen anything like this with higher education. And so I'm a member of the Legislative Council, which is a committee of about 16 members, 8 Senate, 8 House. And we had our lawyers take a look at this, and they came back and were crystal clear that this is a violation of the separation of powers. Basically, there are 3 branches of government, and you can't have the executive invading the other branch the way she did here with the legislature. That one's black and white. Also, a number of these higher education institutions are all constitutionally created. So while she can line item specific pieces, she can't eliminate the whole thing. And so based on that, we made the decision to file suit asking the Supreme Court, it's a direct case to the Supreme Court, for what's called a writ of mandamus, which basically says, Secretary of Department of Finance Administration, reinstate the monies that were vetoed. We felt confident, our lawyers were very confident, that this is something the court would address. As you all know, the court made the decision not to dismiss the case, but to basically say that it wasn't ripe at this point. So it wasn't ruling that it was that what she did was constitutional. It basically said, we want you to go back into the legislative process and figure this out, because if you figure it out, we won't have to deal with this. They didn't say that. All they said is it's not right, but that's what it means. Where we are today is a week from now, we'll probably be right in the middle of it. She has called us back into special session on the 24th of May. And the purpose, there's a number of things that get put on what's called the call. There's a proclamation. And in a special session, basically only items that are on the proclamation are considered germane, things that we can deal with. And so the big focus is obviously the budget, tax reform, and then, interestingly, how are we going to pay for it? Are we going to cut our way to pay for this? Are we going to pass this huge tax bill that has all these unknown consequences? Those are the kind of questions du jour that we are dealing with. I will say that legislative leaders in the Senate on both sides of the aisle, Democrat and Republican, have been meeting and talking and kind of thinking through how we move forward. I'm a big fan of tax reform. I think we have to do it, but we have to be smart about it and we have to do it right. And when you are in a financial situation like we are in right now, there's no room for error. And quite frankly, to go and take a huge leap of faith that somehow this is going to work and somehow we're going to pass something that's not going to have a massive impact to our state, I just think is the wrong move. We've not seen a specific proposal yet from the governor with respect to what Representative Harper's bill is going to look like. The governor did say late last week or early this week, I lost track of time, that she now was willing to look at reimposing the food tax. That's the first time we've heard that publicly from her, which is quite extraordinary given she's got this pledge not to sign any tax increases, and yet all of a sudden the first one that she's willing to look at as part of tax reform is the food tax. That made a number of us pause. So, moving forward, we need to obviously reinstate higher ed. It is absolutely critical. And so you will see, I think the House Republicans came out Monday with a proposal to basically reinstate the cuts that the governor made. That's consistent with where we are. We passed a good budget. We should reinstate the pieces that have been cut out of the budget. Question then becomes, how do we fund it? So we need $150 million. Interestingly, since the session, we've continued to get new revenue numbers for what's happening in our economy. With the projections that are coming in, is it now looks like we have about $110 million more than we thought. So the $150 million we need to pay for this budget, there's about $110 million that's coming, and that's recurring money. Gross receipts are up, personal income is up. These are good things. And so because of that, it narrows the gap in terms of the money we need to come up with. The House Republicans proposed that we basically come in, pass a budget, take capital outlay, and capital outlay is severance tax money from minerals that's used for bricks and mortar. It's non-recurring money. It's used to do prisons and schools and different things. You hear lots about pork and the messaging about pork. But there is a way to take this non-recurring bond money and use these tools called sponge bonds to convert that money into convert it into general fund dollars. So all of a sudden, the money we should be using for our prisons and our schools can be moved over and used to fund the budget. So there's about $70 million, and the House Republicans are proposing that we take all that money and use it for the general fund. One time, non-recurring. If you take that money with the money that's come in, it's conceivable the governor could sign the budget, sign the capital outlay bill, assuming that were to pass, and you would have a balanced budget with almost zero reserves. Not very responsible. The other thing that the House Republicans want to do is they want to invade the corpus of the legislative retirement fund. This is money that's been already put into the fund. So, and for all the state employees out there, pay attention, because guess what? Basically, it's in the same pot of money where the PERA money sits. And it's money that's been vested. It's already in. It's not money that's coming in. And so Wayne Probst, who is a former law school classmate of mine from UNM and is the head of PRA, came out last week and said that is unconstitutional. And it's about $12 million or so. But this is the constant messaging and desire to, play political games, quite frankly. And that's their plan. Take the legislative retirement, take the capital outlay, pass the budget, and life is good. So I think, we're trying to figure out, what direction we're going to take. I will say this, during the session, one of the things that I was particularly proud about is serving in a chamber where you had bipartisan, responsible budgeting. And so we put forward a bipartisan, responsible plan. The budget was good, it was paid for, and we even added a tax reform bill. And so I think, again, what you're going to see is something similar being proposed by those chambers in the legislature, probably, certainly the House Democrats, Senate Democrats, some of the Senate Republicans. There's pieces they like, pieces they may not like. We're working on those kinds of things, and I think that at some point here we will roll out what that's going to look like. One thing that I will say that I just don't think is going to happen, I do not think, I feel very strongly, given our position in the court case, which is still sitting there. Let me just say, if this blows up again, we'll go right back to the court. It's all briefed. They know what's there. I just do not think that because the court made the decision to send us back into special session, that is a signal that we have to go and impose draconian cuts. So all that's left is the higher ed budget and the legislature. The rest of the budget was signed. So to get $150 million out of a $750 million budget, you'd be looking at double-digit cuts to higher education. So again, I just don't think there's an appetite to do that, certainly not from me. We're not going to go back in and open up public school funding. I know there's been a lot of concern about that. I just think that we'll do what the House Republicans have suggested, which is the correct thing, is to reinstate the higher ed and the legislative vetoes, and then figure out how to pay for it, and we'll propose different options, and then it's up to the governor. I also don't think that it makes sense to agree to a tax proposal that's so uncertain and unknown that could have dire consequences to our economy, to all the different, think about all the different nonprofits that are providing critical services in our communities, to all of a sudden be asked to pay an 8% gross receipts tax on purchases. I mean, it's a significant change. Doctors, hospitals, these are major, major changes. And I'm a big proponent of doing tax policy reform, and it's tough. It's really hard. But I just think trying to do this in what's going to be a pretty surgical special session is the wrong time to do it. So I think you will see bipartisan support for Senator Scherer's proposal to do the tax study. And then once we have this tax study, whether we come back in a special session or we do it in the 30-day session, I think that it's an important thing to do. We have to fix our tax code. It's critical for all of us that don't have exemptions and deductions. We're the ones that get stuck with a bill. And so in terms of moving forward and bringing business here, the first thing they look at is they look at the tax code, and it's kind of a Swiss cheese of all these exemptions. It's something we need to fix. I'm confident that the legislature is actually in a good place. Both chambers are working together. House Republicans so far have not been willing to kind of work together with the Senate Republicans or some of the Senate Republicans. I mean, there's in different places. Maybe that will change. I just think, again, our job is to present responsible options for Governor Martinez. And then if she makes a decision to veto the bill again, I guess at that point the court's going to need to take a look at it.